Yakuza, like a dragon, baby. It's a certified classic. You know the vibes. What do you mean you don't know it? Wait a minute, you're serious? You don't know it? The nearly 2-decade-old franchise following the lives of those intertwined with organized crime in Japan, where the ideals of our protagonists are challenged by twisted mirror reflections of themselves who have often fallen to the evil of seeking infinite power, where these clashes of ideals are often solved by ripping off their shirts and beating the absolute hell out of each other? You still don't know it? Alright, what if I play this? Yeah, it's the Dama Dene meme, alright? It came from this franchise, right? Are we on the same page now? Coming from the mind of Toshihiro Nagoshi, the Yakuza series follows the lives of those intertwined with organized crime, or the Yakuza. The fictional cities that these games take place in are based off of real cities in Japan. Kamurocho, the main city of the franchise, is famously based off of the entertainment district of Kabukicho in Shinjuku. I know it's very touristy for me to say this, but if you just go on Google Maps and kind of walk through Kabukicho, you can kind of start to see the similarities between Kabukicho and Kamurocho, and you can really see how much detail and time went into recreating these cities, almost to a scarily accurate degree. This goes for other cities in the game as well, such as Sotenbori, based off of Dotonbori in Osaka. These games sort of act as a snapshot of Japan and the current culture at the time of each game's release. The cities change as the games go on, real-world Japanese brands make appearances, such as Don Quixote, to add to the feeling of realism as well. Characters dress differently as fashion trends come and go. You can see this very obviously between Yakuza 0 and pretty much any other game in the franchise. The cities are also consistently different between them as well. The world of Yakuza is rich with substance, from little mini games such as darts to actual fully realized Sega arcades to sub-stories that are wacky as all hell. As well as surprisingly emotional. If you haven't played any of the Yakuza games before, I highly recommend you do. They're well worth your time, well worth your money. They'll give you stories that you really fall in love with. As well as that, this video is a gigantic spoiler for Yakuza Like a Dragon because good God, I cannot stop thinking about the ending to this game. Okay, so let's do a quick story recap so that when I start to talk about the ending, it actually makes sense. If you've played the game and you know the story up until the ending, skip to this timestamp to skip the recap. Otherwise, let's get to it. Ichiban Kasuga was born in a soapland in Kamurocho and raised by the employees. Growing up, Kasuga forms a solid bond with the people of the Kamurocho and dreams constantly of becoming a hero due to his countless nights playing Dragon Quest behind the counter. After swearing total loyalty to Masumi Awakawa, being sworn into the family, forming a father-son relationship with him and taking care of his wheelchair-bound son Masato Awakawa, Kasuga is asked to shoulder the blame for a murder in place of Captain Joe Sawashiro, which results in him serving an 18-year-long prison sentence. After his release, he finds no one from his life there to greet him on the outside, and is shocked to see how much life has changed since he's been locked away. Kasuga wastes no time trying to find Arakawa, and when he finally does, he is shot and dumped in Izazaki Ijincho, where he is saved by those of a local homeless camp. Soon after, when Kasuga tries to find work, he runs into Bleach Japan, an organization dedicated to eliminating the grey zones in Japan where illegal activity is tolerated and bleach them white and pure. They mostly target the sex workers, foreigners, and the homeless of the community. After job hopping and finding some new friends along the way, Kasuga and co are thrust directly into the heat of conflict by meeting with the heads of the Great Wall of Muscle, or the Ijin 3, where they reveal the counterfeiting scheme they have in place with a politician in order to maintain the peace between the three. They entrust Kasuga with preventing the crumbling of the Great Wall of Muscle. After one of Kasuga's friends defects temporarily and informs Bleach Japan co-founder Hajime Ogasawara and loyal member Sote Kume about the counterfeiting scheme, Kasuga sees a photo of Ogasawara with founder of Bleach Japan, Ryo Aoki, who he instantly recognizes as Masato Arakawa. Kasuga then meets with Aoki, where he learns that he traveled to the US to study and receive treatment for his disability that left him wheelchair-bound. Aoki founded Bleach Japan, then became a politician to purge Ijincho of the residents relying on the grey zones and utilize radical ideals to gain power, which worked shockingly well. After finally meeting with Arakawa again and not being shot, and then witnessing the disbandment of the two biggest Yakuza clans in Japan, and asking him if it can go back to the old times, Arakawa is killed. Kasuga immediately assumes that it is Aoki behind it all, which he is, and is heartbroken, demanding answers. After a run-in with Sawashiro, he reveals to Kasuga that he had a child around the same time that Arakawa did, but being 15 years old at the time, was unfit to take care of the child. Him and his partner decide to lead the child to its fate in Coin Locker 99. Arakawa saves the child on Coin Locker 99 and rushes to a hospital to try and save it. However, there were two infants placed in coin lockers on the same night, right next to each other, one in 99 and the other in 101. The child in locker 99 is Sawashiro's son, who was taken by Arakawa under the assumption that it was his son, who grew up to be Masato Arakawa. The child in locker 101, however, was actually Arakawa's son, who was found by Soplan employees and grew up to be Ichiban Kasuga, meaning that he is Arakawa's biological son. Soon after, Kasuga and the gang dismantle Aoki's campaign, by revealing on television his real identity and therefore his ties to the Yakuza. Kasuga and the gang trick Aoki into saying incriminating statements to which they post online. Aoki loses it, fights Kasuga, gets his ass handed to him, and even still, Kasuga is trying to get him to turn over a new leaf, to which he refuses, escapes, and returns to the coin lockers where it all started. After having his entire political campaign and his life ruined, Aoki escapes to the coin lockers where Kasuga arrives soon after, stating he had a feeling Aoki would show up here, as he knows him better than he thinks. Despite being held at gunpoint, Kasuga advances towards Aoki, hoping he can still get through to him somehow. Aoki spills his guts out, lamenting over his life and how he did everything he possibly could and still no one could appreciate who he was on the inside. The power that he coveted, changed his body for, his entire image for, even killed for, it was all really fragile at the end of the day. In the end, the power he chased was only so he could run away from his deep insecurity about his body and his feelings of being weak and unwanted by others. But instead of addressing the core issues surrounding his self-image, he chose to run from the issue, and hope the external changes make up for it, and then attempt to wipe out anyone who reminds him of him when he was weak. He reminisces about when he met a woman, Yumino, both as Masato and Aoki, and how when he was Masato, she called him creepy and weird behind his back, only viewing him as a wallet she could take infinite funds from. But when he meets her again as Aoki, not letting on to her who he really was, she calls him sophisticated and compliments him for his intelligence at his age. To Aoki, this event shows that any respect anyone had from him came purely from the fact that he was the son of a Yakuza patriarch, not from who he was as a person. He feels like anything people did for him was purely out of obligation, not because they actually cared. At the coin lockers, he complains to Kasuga that no one really appreciated him for who he was, and despite everything he did, he was still unhappy internally.
I started off in life with a weak, ugly body that embarrassed me. I worked hard to improve myself, but after all that, I still wasn't happy because no one appreciated who I really was on the inside.
Kasuga rebuts that this wasn't true in the slightest. He explains that both Arakawa and Sawashiro put him first in everything they did, all because they cared about him. He just didn't see how they cared because he was too caught up in his self-hatred. Kasuga goes to great lengths to demonstrate how much he cared for Masato, detailing how when he first saw Ryo Aoki, he knew immediately that it was Masato underneath, and the only way he could have possibly known this was because he deeply cared about him. Aoki tries to downplay Kasuga's points as bullshit family love, to which only frustrates Kasuga further. Kasuga goes on to explain that no matter how badly he screwed up, Arakawa, Sawashiro, and himself never once gave up on him. They were always there for him, not out of obligation or feeling sorry for him. It was because they were family. The very rigid black and white view that Masato has on emotions and relationships doesn't really apply here. There isn't any logic to why they stood by him, other than that they were all connected deep in their hearts, and that family is a complicated concept that you can't really explain with black and white arguments. Aoki's feelings of not having anyone love him are unfounded, because he had 3 people right there who would drop everything and dedicate their lives to him. It's selfish to say that nobody cared about him, because in doing so it spits directly in the face of everyone who does care about him. Then, this happens.
This may not be what you want to hear, but you know, I consider you my brother, man. That means something to me. Don't make me watch my brother die. Please. I can't do it. Masato. I'm begging you.
It seems that with this sentence, Kasuga finally breaks through to Masato, who now lowers the gun. Kasuga has finally gotten through to the last bit of humanity that Masato had left. As they both cry their eyes out, Masato opens the coin locker he was placed in all those years ago. In what I think is an amazing piece of symbolism, Masato places the gun he almost used to end his life in the coin locker where his life began. The gun, in this moment, symbolizes everything that Masato became. It symbolizes both Ryo Aoki and the old Masato Arakawa. The old Masato Arakawa, who hated himself, viewed himself as weak and too dependent on others for assistance, and Ryo Aoki, who coveted power and used people such as Ogasawara and Kume to gain more political power to scrub out those who remind him of himself, by promoting ideals he didn't even really believe in. Someone who would have sent Japan into a near irreparable state of discrimination against those less fortunate. In this moment, when he puts the gun in the locker, he's accepting his sins, and the fact that he can't run away from what he's done anymore. If he had used the gun to take his life, it would only continue to do what he's done his entire life, run away from the problem. By putting the gun in the locker, he isn't running away anymore, he's accepting it. He calls his secretary, says goodbye, and is ready to turn himself in and start from rock bottom, hopefully this time with a better outcome. This entire scene is fantastic. It has the deep, raw, emotional cut of a traditional Yakuza ending, but it feels real as well. It's no surprise that previous protagonist Kazuma Kiryu has been in some of the most unbelievable situations of all time. When you start really describing what he's been through, it starts to sound like that kid in school who did nothing but make up stories about himself to sound cool, when in reality we all kinda knew he sounded like a loser every time he spoke. Some of the endings of the Kiryu Saga games are just a bit too campy for my liking. While Like a Dragon has some definite conveniences, like the 2 coin locker babies twist, this ending feels raw and unexpectedly real. This ending is Kasuga pleading with someone he cares about very deeply not to end his own life. While I haven't been in this type of situation personally, I've known people who have been, and it is one of the most stress-inducing and upsetting situations to be in. As well as this, to see Kasuga, the charismatic, overly optimistic beacon of light in so many people's lives, absolutely break down, crying and pleading with Masato not to take his own life. It really hits hard due to Kasuga's natural disposition of being happy and enthusiastic. For a majority of the game, he's always optimistic for the next step in his journey. When he's betrayed by Arakawa and shot in the chest and dumped in a different city, does he give up? No, he immediately tries to find a solution to get him out of rock bottom and find Arakawa again. He's a hopeful and charismatic man who brings joy to a lot of people. So seeing him exude such pure emotion through his sobbing and misty red eyes, it really hits hard. The impact of the scene is only strengthened by the phenomenal voice acting, by both the Japanese and English voice actors. Kazuhiro Nakaya and Kaiji Tang voice Kasuga, while Kosuke Toyumi and Woo Yeon Lee voice Masato. Like seriously, all 4 voice actors do phenomenal jobs here portraying both people who think they are about to lose their brother, and people who think the only way out is death. One line that the English dub has that I love is,
"We were always there for you. We would have done anything for you. Gone to hell and back. All you had to do was ask."
Which every time I think about it, it gets me a little misty-eyed because he's right. Families do some wild things for each other sometimes, and there's no other explanation as to why they do it other than, he's my son, or that's my mother. There are times where I'm not the biggest fan of my brother, but I would absolutely do anything for him, not out of obligation, but because that's my brother. And I certainly would also be crying my eyes out if I had to plead with my own brother not to take his own life. The themes of family, loyalty, and second chances all come to a head here in this ending, and ultimately result in a satisfying ending where, contrary to many other Yakuza games, the antagonist doesn't have to die. Masato is ready to turn himself in, and Kasuga is more than prepared to help him climb back from rock bottom. I guess I paused it a bit too early, there's still some time left. Silly me. You know what, let's just finish off here and let's see a happy ending in our reunion between brothers, huh?
Huh?
Out of nowhere, Kume comes up to Masato and stabs him in the side, instilling both shock and fear into Kasuga and Masato. Kume expresses his disappointment and anger towards Masato for hiding who he really was and lying. In a chilling line, Kume states,
"But it's not too late. True righteousness will triumph."
Before taking the knife out and walking off. I'll be honest, when this first happened, it pissed me off. I was unreasonably angry. The entire game, this weak, pathetic, and sorry excuse for a person has been nothing but a joke, a total laughingstock who talked a big game but could never back it up. Kasuga literally mocks Kume to his face multiple times over the course of the game for being a total hypocrite in relation to his philosophy of grey zones. Kume felt like nothing more than a comedic relief villain who you hated to look at but loved to see because you knew mockery of him was soon to follow. So to then have him come and kill Masato after this heart-wrenching speech by Kasuga begging him to keep living and turn his life around, and actually succeeding in getting through to him, only to have it ruined by the sniveling asshole, made me unreasonably upset. But the more I thought about it, the less mad I became, and soon realized this was the only ending that could have possibly happened. Kume is a weak-minded individual, easily coerced by those in power and heavily influenced by manipulation and fear-mongering tactics. Kume was manipulated by the ideals that Aoki promoted yet didn't believe in, and in turn pretty much dedicated his life to the cause. After being endorsed by Aoki for district seat, he likely thought they had a close relationship, when in reality Aoki didn't care about him in the slightest, and only used him and many other people for his own gain in pursuit of power and control. Upon learning who Aoki really was, Kume's already fragile mind likely snapped in two. His entire life was dedicated to Bleach Japan, and when he finds out the truth, Aoki's former life, and realizing the ties that Bleach Japan has with the Yakuza, the only solution he thinks of is, well, one of the greatest sins of mankind: murder. Kume literally bleached Masato in the name of purity. It's unnerving that in this moment, Kume views what he is doing as righteous and truly good. It's pure, unhinged, sociopathic behavior. And when I think about this act coming from Kume of all people, it's actually a little scary. It's also ironic that someone so dedicated to bleaching the grey zones committed the darkest act possible. As Masato falls to the ground and Kasuga rightfully screams out in anguish, he mimics how Arakawa saved Masato all those years ago by carrying him from the coin lockers and running off past the crowds. The tragic irony about Masato's death is that it happens exactly where his life began, and in his final moments realizes he already got his second chance when he was saved from the coin lockers all those years ago. While it upsets me that Kume was the one to kill Masato, it only makes sense that the person to kill him was a fanatic follower that he brainwashed and used as a tool to further a radical ideology that was pushed purely to get him political power. It's exactly what he deserved for all the wrong he did. It's sad and depressing, but it's also beautiful in its execution. If you think about it, Masato was always destined to die here at the coin lockers. It was just a matter of time until it actually happened, and all the more gut-wrenching that it happened the way it did after such a beautiful moment between brothers. After the funeral for Arakawa and Masato, Kasuga makes it known that he wants to stay in Ijinsha with his close friends. In a moment of contemplation, Kasuga reflects on the dying words of Masato. In his final moments, Masato encourages Kasuga to never give up on life, and through his words ponders how nice it would have been to start over again from the bottom, with Kasuga by his side, just like he said. Yakuza Like a Dragon features the theme of light and shadow very heavily, often using the idea of rock bottom to illustrate this idea further. It teaches us that rock bottom doesn't need to be all dark and gloomy. If you can still see the light, there's the hope in the journey out. Kasuga made it out of rock bottom, and he shows us that no matter the situation you're in, you can always climb back out of it. The motif of light and shadow is as prominent in Yakuza Like a Dragon as it is in our own lives. There can't be one without the other, they need each other. Our darkest moments in life are usually the moments where we learn the most, and by learning, we can climb ourselves out of the void. Darkness isn't a reason to give up, it's a reason to keep going. Kasuga's story illustrates this throughout the entire game, right up until the end. While he may have lost a lot, he gained a lot more by forming strong relationships with people he now considers close friends. Adachi, Namba, Saiko, Zhao, Jungi-han, and the countless side characters he's impacted as well as the nameless citizens that he's likely saved by preventing Masato from getting too far ahead. With the adventure he's been on, the bright moments of triumph and the dark moments of loss, at his core, he's still that loyal, optimistic, inspiring person who always pushes on in the face of overwhelming odds. The entire journey culminates in Kasuga becoming what he not only dreamed of becoming, but was always destined to become: a hero.